Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition and the fall of the human child. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of signals that are just coming in from society overall. There's just been this massive change, and it is essentially that the human child is no longer cool. Like, it does not get affection or likability at the societal macro level. This is a huge fundamental change, and I definitely think we need to look at this change in society and then say, okay, what does this mean in our Dungeons & Dragons games? How do we process this in Dungeons & Dragons? Because we have to process it at the table, and we have to process it at the industry level, the industry level for Dungeons & Dragons. Will this impact Dungeons & Dragons? Will it hurt or harm Dungeons & Dragons? And then what do we do about it in our games? How do we deal with this change in cultural society as we dungeon master, okay? And even as we dungeon play, as we're dungeon players, right? So let's look at it. So first of all, let me make my point. Okay, so here's my take. I believe that what has happened is that it used to be in society that people generally liked human children, right? That human children had a level of acceptability and likableness, and people just enjoyed children at the societal level, right? That is definitely no longer the case. I'm going to give you a different some different points. Okay, first of all, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I just watched that movie. There was a pit bull in that movie, and Brad Pitt went into combat with a hippie woman. Actually, multiple hippie women, and his dog went into combat with multiple hippie women. And I was like, wait, are they putting a dog in combat in this movie? And I knew before the moment the fight started that the dog could not get a scratch. American society has given. So here's the point. I think the dog puppy now enjoys all the benefits a human child used to enjoy. Societal protection, societal acceptance, a general, ooh, look at that cute child, right? Like, just a likability, right? All of that is gone from the human child at the societal level, and how now has transferred to the dog puppy and to dogs, but more to the dog puppy, right? They're like the way American society interacts today with dog puppies is the way it interacted with human children even 20 years ago at the macro level. I'm not talking about any singular people or any singular families. I'm talking the macro level of American society, okay? So how do we get here? Well, we got here. I think the biggest change by far is climate change, right? At this point, there's a huge question among any left, liberal, coastal elite on whether it's a good idea to have a child, because children have massive carbon footprints. And I think most people today, we've reached a point where the macro level are saying, no, you should definitely not bring a human into this world. Yeah, they're gonna drive cars, and they're gonna eat meat, and they're gonna just do human things, and that sucks. And that's it. That's climate change killed likability for the human child at the macro level. There are other things involved, but that is definitely the biggest thing that happened, that changed. And the other thing is, there is also a level of protection that used to happen for the human child that is gone. So I just finished watching The Prince. It's an animated adult show that is on HBO Max, and it is about the royal family. In my humble opinion, it is about the royal family. There's a lot of clues that it's about the royal family. It has a specific disclaimer at the beginning that says this isn't about the royal family, but everyone in the show is drawn exactly like the royal family. Everyone in the show uses literally the same names as the royal family, and it's just kind of like, it's like when somebody says all due respect, and that actually means no due respect. Really, it seems very clearly to me, in my humble opinion, about the royal family, right? And there's a child in it. The main character is a child. So it's Prince William. Prince William is the son of, and I'm not like making up a name. That's literally what they call him in the show. But Prince William in the show is, is, in my opinion, clearly meant to depict Prince William, Princess Diana's son, right? And then he is a grown man and has a son named Prince George. And Prince George is the main character of The Prince, right? In fact, I think that's what they're talking about. And he is just the character in the show is an atrocious garbage human. Like, they just portray him as a monster at every level, like just harming people around him in every single way but physically, right? Like just insulting them, like breaking down their mental health, harming them emotionally, harming them intellectually, harming them in every possible way but physical. And I looked at, and I watched all 12 episodes of this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. When I was done, I was like, the human child is a target now. Like, you couldn't harm a hair on the dog, in a combat scene in a rated R movie, but you can go at a human child like daggers out, right? Like, which is what I think the prince did to Prince George, Prince William's son, right? The Pippa Middleton, I think is, or maybe that's that might be her sister, right? But like, I couldn't believe, and I felt really bad after watching it because I was like, oh my gosh, this kid is definitely going to see this. The only question is if he'll see it now when he's like 7 or 8 years old, or if he'll see it when he's like 13. But there's no possibility he won't see it, and it will be devastating to him, I think. Like, just absolutely. So the amount of savagery that was just unleashed on a human child, right? So all that to say, I think it's done, right? Like, human children are no longer cool, like at the macro society level, and it is outrageously cool to be like, I don't like kids. Just people just say it openly, like, because they don't fear any retaliation, and they're like, oh yeah, kids will burn carbon, they suck, right? And I'm just like, whoa, we've arrived here as a species. It's shocking to me, right? So how do we process this in D&D? So first and foremost, is this going to hurt or help D&D? I hate to say this, but this is going to help D&D. No two ways about it, right? Because what's going to happen is, and we've already seen countries do this, where they have fewer children, and then they treat every child like a noble, right? And those children, and so when you treat every child like a noble, you know what they're going to get into? A super expensive game that has a lot of reading and is just a world you can live in, right? Like, in a world where children are incredibly rare and everyone's going to be treated like a prince or princess because they're so incredibly rare, right? D&D is going to eat it up, right? So so I hate to say that this is going to help D&D, but it's just so clearly a fact, right? D&D is this, we are crafting a world where Dungeons & Dragons is going to become a more and more valuable product every day. Like, I think it's all the calamities of the world make Dungeons & Dragons more perfect, right? And this is one of them, right? So, the other thing I want to talk about is the urchin background. I've always, like, I don't disallow anything in any of the official D&D books, but I do not encourage anyone to run an urchin into my games. I think it's super weird that it's even in there. But now I'm kind of thankful. I'm like, oh, it's kind of good that you could play a child in Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because they're hammered right now. They're like, children are not appreciated. So it's nice that it's still in the game. The other thing is, what can we do about it? I actually think we really have to think about Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons is an incredible combat simulator, but it's not an incredible domesticity simulator. And there's literally no ability, like, within the game to really function as a parent in the game. In fact, I've never, ever once had any player character say they had a child. Not once. It's incredible, when I think about it. So I think we should start to ask Wizards of the Coast to emulate some level of domesticity into the game and build it. I think you could do it through a source book. I would really like it if having children was actually mechanically structured in the game. Because if it's not there, people won't do it. If there's no mechanical benefit, people aren't going to touch it, right? So I think it would be nice to demonstrate from the interaction pillar how a player character could actually be a parent, and then interact in a loving way with their children. That's my opinion. What do you think? Do you think that the fall of the human child will impact Dungeons and Dragons the way I've said it will, or in different ways? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and thank you very much for all the comments and everything else. Take care.